Driving instructors of Reddit, who was the worst student you had or the craziest drive you had? I'm a driving instructor, had a low-confidence 16-year-old driver on the highway for the first time. Got her in the middle lane doing 65 when she states, "I think I'm gonna fall asleep," as my mind is processing, WTF did she just say? I look over at her and her head goes clunk up against the driver's window and her eyes are closed and she looked passed out. Her hands are still on the wheel but she turned to the left. Now we are in the left lane heading toward the median. Her foot went to the floor. I tried to get the car back onto the pavement and I had to switch hands because I needed to get her foot off the accelerator and get the steering back under control. I got the car back onto the roadway, under control, and headed for the breakdown lane on the right side. With my heart thumping, I got the car stopped. At this point, the driver sits up alertly, laughs and says, "Haha. What did I miss?" She had narcolepsy and she nor her parents ever told anyone. I was obligated to notify DMV, and her permit was revoked, until she was certified by her doctor. Her parents were pissed, but you and I are alive because we got her off the road. I'm a driving instructor but I teach people to drive semis. The worst student I ever had already had 4 years of driving experience, with what's called a Rocky Set 45 trailer with a 28 trailer behind it. This person couldn't turn for shit. I still wonder how they never hit anyone. So, when I train it's 2 28s, that's all they pull for 2 weeks. So, we take our second turn, a left onto a pretty wide street and they're turning like they're in a car. Like, not even into the intersection and they've already started to turn. I tell them no, straighten out and go forward until I tell you to turn. They keep turning, I say no. Straighten out and go forward until you pass the double yellow lines. They keep turning and if they keep turning like this we're going to clip another car turning left. At this point I say no. Straight. Just go straight. Thankfully he does. I tell them to pull over and they do. At this point, I turn to them and scream, "What the fuck was that? Give me the keys, I'm driving." I take them back to an intersection, make a right and tell them that's how you turn, wide. Pull over at a gas station and switch back out. Same thing, shit turns. I ask them what they're doing. "I'm turning, boss." I say, "No, go deeper, you're going to hit someone." I took me 5 days just get them to turn. He's a good driver though, just needed some edges worked off. Class A CDL instructor. Not my drive, but another of our trucks was heading southbound. Student driving, instructor in passenger seat. We are located in mostly suburbs/inner city. Lots of traffic. Student in the left lane while a car heading northbound swerved into their lane. They hit a Ford Focus head-on. I arrived on scene before police, we were 5 minutes behind them, and found the guy in the Focus still in his car. I'll never forget how he looked. No injuries, just sad. And when I asked if he was okay he said, "I wish I wasn't." He told officers he tried suicide by truck, and they took him to be evaluated by psychiatrists. The student and instructor were both fine but the student ended up dropping from the program. This is the opposite but I'll never have the chance to share this story otherwise. I was doing my second behind the wheel with a driving instructor. I was already really nervous before I got in the car and she said, "You're the last student I'll ever have." They fired me. After an awkward pause while she stared at me, she laughed and said, "No, actually I'm moving to Chicago to work for a local news station." I didn't find it nearly as funny as she did, lol. Obligatory not a driving instructor but mine told me about all the worst drivers he's had. He told me about a girl I went to school with, he shared names, and how she refused to get close to the speed limit and he was worried she'd fail because she was too careful. I asked if he's ever felt like he was in danger and he talked about a guy a long time ago that went way too fast and refused to slow down, blew a stoplight, and eventually got pulled over by a cop during his driving lesson. Not an instructor, but someone I know had his instructor scream, "We're gonna die." Man, that'll really help your confidence. Former instructor here. I was also the office manager for the driver's ed. I mostly did office work but was certified to make extra cash on weekends and to fill in an emergency. My personal worst was a very sweet, very timid girl who was terrified to go anywhere near the speed limit if it were anything over 30. On back roads in the country, that was terrifying. The worst one I can think of nearly caused an accident while on his driver's license test by just pulling out of the parking lot. That's obviously an automatic fail. So the kid and instructor come back, and then the dad comes storming in pissed that his kid failed. He's screaming at me and the instructor while the poor kid is sitting there head in hands, obviously mortified by his dad's behavior. I ended up threatening to call the police to finally get him to leave. The absolute worst drive was after I left the company BC I moved, but it ended up in the news, so I found out. A kid and an instructor were on a drive, great kid by all accounts. Another driver, a dude in his truck, was distracted on his phone and hit the driver's ed car. It wasn't a terrible accident, but BC of health problems the instructor had, he ended up dying later at the hospital. RIP, Paul. Not an instructor, but this was while I was doing my driving test along with 2 other people in the car. Driver 1 almost rammed into a group of kids using the crosswalk. Driver 2, she was driving and the teacher said to her, "Do you see anything wrong with what you're doing right now?" She then said she didn't, and she was driving on the wrong side of the road. He then hit his brakes and said, "You failed the test. Now get out." Looks at me and said, "You're up, kid." It didn't help me by starting my driver's test while having 2 kids in the back crying. But I did pass my test though. Not an instructor, but when I was in driver's ed, there was a guy in his 3rd year of the class, 2nd semester. He was a senior, and this was a 1-semester class, so his 6th time. We would be on the driving course. He would go into a different student's zone. I was on the figure 8 and he joined me going the wrong direction. I almost hit a different kid trying to avoid him hitting me, crashed a car through the fence at the end of the course and into the ditch in the field by the course, ended up going the wrong way on the freeway at 70, no idea how, there was a median barrier, and crashed a car into the auto shop at the school. No idea how he was allowed to take the class in the first place, because he was apparently this bad every time he took the class. Also not sure how he survived his 5 previous times in the class. Motorcycle instructor. I had one student blow a turn wobble around back onto the course. I'm frantically blowing my whistle to blow the exercise dead. Everyone is stopped but the wayward rider, who then slow-mo fixated on another student and ran into them. Didn't finish the class. For the life of me I can't understand how USA driving instructors can zip their pants with balls that big. Just sitting in a car with a driver with no training while not having no controls yourself? Having my own set of pedals and extended mirrors should be the minimum for preventing scary situations. My instructor told me about a little old lady, LOL for short, who some reason had decided that retirement would be a great time to her license. So they're coming up to a roundabout, and this being a RHT country, you're supposed to go to the right. Instructor tells her to take the 3rd exit, and comments that you can signal this by signaling left going through the roundabout. LOL misunderstands, signals left, and goes fucking left. Luckily nothing happened, and the instructor understood that this particular student had a very low cognitive load threshold and would not be able to small talk. He remembered her fondly and even helped her pick out her new car. As he said, that was the least he could do. It was the most anybody had ever spent on license training at that school. By something like a factor of 4. Not instructor and anti-bad driving, instructor would fall asleep for short naps. At the time my twin sister and myself, 15F turning 16, did our driver's ed together in July. Our 16th birthday was in mid-July, and in our state temps were at 15.5, and you could test after your birthday when driver's ed was complete. We grew up in a pretty rural area and had plenty of experience on dirt bikes, 4-wheelers, and a few months of driving with our parents and close family friends, ranging from small 2-door cars to full-size SUVs, so we were both pretty comfortable behind the wheel. Lou was our instructor and was the sweetest older black gentleman that unfortunately did not have any AC in his teaching car. So when you're spending 8 hours, we would do 4-hour shifts. In a car in July it gets pretty miserable with all of the normal tedious training and the parallel parking practice. He was so comfortable with our driving when we could actually get back onto the country roads 45 to 55 miles per hour, and the car would cool down real nice and he would just kind of doze off. At first we were like, oh no. Do we stop? Do we just keep driving? So I just kept driving for probably close to a half hour through the lovely countryside when he finally woke up and just chuckled and was like, "Oh, well, I guess I am pretty comfortable with your driving," and chuckled some more and had us stop somewhere for him to buy us all some snacks. Not an instructor, but when I was in driver's ed we had a girl that was terrifying. She was all way over the middle line and hit every pothole. One especially exciting day she put us in a ditch. The car had to be towed out of, then on the next lesson side-swiped a car in the oncoming lane. All while the instructor told us about his second job as a security guard at a popular camping area where he caught my stepdad screwing a family friend before he was my stepdad. I asked stepfather about it. He laughed and admitted to it while telling me about said instructor getting caught with my BRST friends and at the same place. Wild times. My uncle also fought the co-instructor when he was younger. Gotta love small towns. I was the student, and I doubt I was this dude's wildest lesson. He spent the whole time ranting about his ex-wife and how he had to take low-paying jobs so that he would pay less in alimony and child support. Then we get to this park, he tells me to turn into it, and then to park the car. I'm a pretty new driver, so I am inching my way into a spot, trying to get it right even in the empty lot, but then he slams on his instructor brake. He brings the car to a stop in the middle of 4 spots, blurts out, "I have to potty," and bolts out of the car into the park's visitor center. I was absolutely flummoxed. My driver's ed teacher when I was 15 told me I was the only student in all his years of doing this that got stuck on a speed bump. I was so scared. I was going so slow I was not able to make it over the speed bump and got stuck right on the top of it. He was laughing in exasperation. Not an instructor. Girl I went to school with was banned from driving her sophomore year when the teacher noticed she was creeping up too fast, and instead of hitting the brake she hit the gas and drove onto a curb and into a yard and almost hit a house within 6 seconds. So funny. They were excellent instructors too. Best testers I think I ever had. Taught following distance, stopping distance, not to tailgate, and just tons of information that most people I know that took driver's ed didn't even know about. Really cool people. How she did that was unmistakably not due to the teachers. Not a driver's ed instructor, but my classmate crashed head-on into a huge snowbank during a drive once. I was in the back, instructor in the front. We were in an empty parking lot. I have no idea how she ended up hitting it, but the car was totaled and we had to walk back. Also, the classroom was a double-wide trailer in another empty parking lot with a 2x4 in the center of the room holding the sagging ceiling up, which my other classmate and friend decided to karate kick out one day. Obligatory. Not an instructor, but my dad once dated a woman who flapped her jaws so much that she couldn't do anything else while talking. She couldn't even eat and talk. So she gets hired at the local bus company, who would train new hires to get them their CDL if they didn't already have one. My dad also worked there and warned the instructor. She's going to be too worried about talking to pay attention to what she's doing. He called it. She talked all the way through training, wouldn't shut up to listen to instruction, would not focus on the training course, and was eventually let go after nearly crashing the training bus into the garage. The instructor told my dad that she was the worst student he'd ever had. I'm not an instructor, but this happened while I was in the car with an instructor and another student. 7 years ago I decided to get driving lessons for myself and my brother. We had the same instructor teach us both at the same time in the same car by taking turns driving for 2 hours a day. Sounds tedious but was good fun to learn together. One day, the instructor got a call while teaching us and he told us that he had another student, a middle-aged lady, who had her driving test the next day and was panicking and wanted to urgently do a quick driving recap right away. The instructor wanted my brother and I to accompany him to this lady's house and wait for 10 to 15 minutes while he took her for a spin in the car. We agreed and got to the lady's house. My brother and I are now in the back seat. The lady is driving with the instructor guiding her from the passenger seat. She starts driving from the front of her house, which is a quiet street. But we can see that this street goes ahead and intersects with a very busy road ahead. As we get closer to the intersection, the instructor tells her to stop. The lady proceeds to ask if she should press the brake alone or press the brake along with the clutch. Meanwhile, the car is approaching the intersection. The instructor says stop, hit the brake, and this lady proceeds to argue, saying she's confused which type of brake she should use. Finally, the handbrake was pulled and the lady was strongly advised to postpone her test, to say the least. Not an instructor, more a witness to two people who were. Driver's ed in high school was held in a portable room that was located next to the little test track they made, just a closed-off portion of student parking. The first incident was someone who confused gas and brake and drove the car into a nearby lake. The second was someone who hit reverse and ended up slamming the car into the classroom. Not a driving instructor, but my first summer job. I was a summer student for a small municipality, and they had also hired a new seasonal man to cut grass. I was 18 and female. The seasonal man was mid-30s. I knew how to drive standard, he didn't, even though he said he did, and one of our jobs was to trailer the mowers and cut the grass around the municipality, but the truck was a standard and there wasn't another available that could pull the trailer. So the last week I worked there, I had to teach him how to drive standard, and he couldn't figure out you have to let the clutch out and press the gas at the same time. He wouldn't listen to me because I was 18, and let's be real, a little snippy. I had to deal with this grumpy dude all day in a small space. But he would slam his foot into the clutch and pull it off as fast as he could and have the gas to the floor. The truck felt like it was literally jumping up and down, and then it would stall. We did that for forever, and eventually the truck wouldn't start and got towed to a mechanic shop. The municipality got a new truck for the next year, which wasn't a standard, thank God, and that guy didn't come back. He'd gotten a full-time job elsewhere. Not an instructor, but my friend in high school backed into a parked car, then a month after getting her car fixed drove into a parked bus. She somehow still has her license almost 20 years later. Kind of the opposite of the question, but I went to a driving school that was just wild. Now, a lot of the driving schools in town are pretty low class, often just one or two guys with cars and an office. This driving school was a big, national company which had their own offices and employed half a dozen driving instructors. The big selling point of this driving school was their defensive driving curriculum. This included things like always having your full lights on, not just your running lights for visibility. But the big thing in the curriculum was distance between cars. Their rule was that you had to leave at least 3 full car lengths between you and the car in front of you when you were stopped at the light. The idea was that if you were going to be rear-ended, you had room to get out of the way. This led to bizarre situations of me having to hang back halfway down the block while waiting at a red light, with the drivers in the other lane all gawking at me and wondering why I wasn't moving up. Ultimately, they abandoned that idea. I think. I haven't seen any other cars doing it since then. Because of the obvious reasons that I'm sure you have all figured out, that it is far more dangerous to behave unusually on the road.